What's going on, everybody? Welcome into MLS Digest. We're previewing week 37 of MLS action coming up this weekend, September 27th and 28th. And we've got a full 15 match slate here to cover with only 3 to 4 games remaining for all these teams, with only a couple games left until decision day in mid-October. And so many good matchups here on this slate and going forward. A lot of playoff positions up for grabs. And we had a couple of midweek games with some makeup games being played. Miami beat NYC on the road, and then the Whitecaps and the Timbers shared the points in a 1-1 draw. So a couple of teams with a couple of games in hand, such as Miami, LAFC, just to note a few. And besides that, I'll get you everything you need to know for these matchups as far as who's in and who's out, lineups, suspensions, injuries, and all those other important information. Before we get into all of that, please make sure to like this video below and subscribe to the channel if you're new. We're almost at 500 subscribers, and I'd really appreciate your support if you're interested in the content and looking to stay tuned to MLS as we wind down and almost get into the playoffs. The first matchup of week 37 is between Toronto and Miami has made and picked up a lot of ground in the Supporter Shield race, and everyone's been essentially dropping points, the 4 or 5 other teams in the race. And because of Miami's games in hand, they currently, because of that as well, are on pace. If they do their business and continue to win out maximum points, would win the Supporter Shield. So currently sitting in third in the East, they had a midweek game in which they completely thrashed NYC on the road, after, of course, last weekend beating DC and then previously beating the Sounders. So they've had back-to-back weeks of midweek games, so that's a lot of congestion. And of course, not the deepest team at the moment. And then Alba also picked up a bit of a knock at the end of that NYC game. So have to travel here once again to Toronto, but Toronto's already been eliminated, and a bunch of teams officially eliminated last week. And now, though, Toronto, even though they once again held the Crew to another draw last week, have nothing to play for the rest of this season in the final 3 or 4 games, whatever it is for them. And so it's hard to really gauge where their motivation lies. I think they are building for next year, of course, as I've talked about. But as far as this lineup, who knows what decisions they're going to make as far as giving potentially other players minutes, shaking things up a little bit maybe now that the pressure, so to speak, is off, and they have the ability to just switch things up. So as for Miami, they're probably going to rotate a little bit, but Messi's in unbelievable form. They went here last year on one of the final match days, or I think the final match day to confirm the Supporter Shield, and it was a grimy game, but they eventually got a very late goal to win 1-0. And I think this is going to be potentially another one of those kind of grindy games, because Toronto's kind of makes it like that, and they've played competitive games the past month. And so I think Miami still wins, but it'll probably be a lower scoring match. Moving on, it's Charlotte hosting Montreal. Charlotte up to third in the East, but they lost last time out. That ended what could have been a win streak that went into double digits, but it ended at 9. Still super impressive nonetheless. But that ended last week with a loss, and here they host Montreal. So they're back at home. One of, if not the best home teams, especially in the East. And Montreal has been eliminated for quite some time. They just lost to St. Louis the other week, and then last week as well, losing to Red Bulls, back-to-back home losses. And so, just not a competitive team. Charlotte at home, of course, is a real force to deal with. But Tim Ream picking up an injury, and he's kind of being assessed. I think he's questionable for this game, and at his age as well, I think they're going to be cautious. And also Pep Biel, he did return off the bench, and then I think got a start last time out, but seems to be dealing with another issue, this time with his knee. And the manager, Dean Smith, is saying that he's kind of 50-50. So also they're going to be cautious with him. Of course, there's only 3 games left. They've made the playoffs. There's still fight for this top 4 because it's still so close. A bunch of teams like 2-3 points out of the top 4. The rest of those current playoff teams. And so these are big decisions to make, but I still think Charlotte should have enough at home. Zaha's been kind of showing up. I know he missed a penalty, I think it was last time out, but Toklamadi's been really filling in since Ajimang has left. And, you know, this team isn't always the prettiest, but they get the job done against the Minnows at home. And so I think this could be something like a 2-0, 2-1 type of win for Charlotte, despite those absences. They really seem to, of course, have turned a corner, and they just, once again, take care of business against a really bad team. So I'm going to see that happening again. Montreal has given me no signs of life, and just even playing with any type of freedom now that they know they've been eliminated. I just don't see that changing. Moving on, it's another Eastern matchup with DC United hosting the Union, and the Union finally got out of a bit of a skid, losing to Vancouver in very embarrassing fashion and then crashing out of the U.S. Open Cup semifinals. And they turned that around, beating New England at home 1-0. The job was done at this point in the season. It doesn't really matter how you do it, just as long as you're getting those points as they fight for both first place in the East and Supporter Shield. But it's out of their hands at the moment fully. You know how DC's been eliminated for some time now? A bit healthy, but kind of a tough nut to crack at home. They have 7 draws at home, 2 wins, 9 losses, and especially recently they've kind of, well, I don't want to say scalped some big names, but they've kept some good teams at bay at home. 1-1 against Orlando City, in which they had a red card, and then 1-1 against Miami, and then of course also just have made it tough for some teams recently. Just 1 loss in the last 5 games, that time coming against Miami in the return game or the opposite fixture. So obviously nothing to play for, but it seems like DC has been not an easy place to get the full 3 points for some of the East's best teams. And the Union are going to look to, of course, kind of reverse that trend in a sense. And Ty Baribo here suspended due to cards, and then Westfield, kind of that one of their wingbacks, who has been also playing on the back line in general, has gone to that under-20 World Cup, as have a couple of other players in MLS, which we'll get to match by match. But regardless, I think the Union, it's hard not to back them here. They've turned their form around slightly, and it's time to handle the business. DC United, of course, we'll see how much they keep running Benteke out here, with another season just completely lost despite his efforts. And we'll see what type of lineup they put out. But I still think the Union will, can easily handle not having Baribo here. Obviously have a lot of striker depth. And it's all about how Bradley Carnell lines this team up, how serious he'll take this DC United. Maybe he can rotate a little bit. But regardless, I'm still going to go with the Union to win in this one 2-0. Here it's New England hosting Atlanta, and both teams officially got eliminated last week. So this is just very good comedic timing. After the Fire, of course, beat Minnesota and extended that gap. Meanwhile, both of these teams dropping points last week, so that didn't do them any help. And with only about 4 games remaining for each, what could have been a potential last chance for both these teams to keep the distance, both are already eliminated. So not much to talk about in this one. 2 very disappointing seasons. Caleb Porter, of course, gone for New England. For Atlanta, probably a bunch of changes coming in the offseason, but not going to make too much drastic decisions in these final couple of games. They've been playing a couple of young players and just switching up the lineup in general. We haven't really seen much of Latte Loth. Almiron's bagged some penalty goals. But, yeah, hard to be interested in this game if you're not a fan of either. And even if you are, yeah, not good signs going into 2026, it seems like either. Next up, we have the Hudson River Derby with the Red Bulls hosting New York City. The Red Bulls, of course, boast one of the league's best home records with 10 wins, 3 draws, and 2 losses. And, they're sitting 4th in the East, though, on home points because the Union Charlotte and NYC are also just so good. And that's obviously a big trend in MLS in general. But that's been the bulk of the Red Bulls' points this season. 33 out of their 43 points coming at home here. So in a Hudson River derby in which in recent history they just have been mostly dominated by NYC, of course, losing already this season in the first game or meeting this season, and then, of course, losing earlier on outside of the MLS playoffs. It's been one that NYC has mostly have had the better results in. So NYC had a midweek game. They played against Miami, got bounced 4-0 at home. And NYC has also played here out at Sports Illustrated Stadium a lot outside of just meeting the Red Bulls. That was kind of their host stadium for Leagues Cup. And so they have familiarity with this, playing on this field outside of like this specific matchup. So it's an interesting one because Alonso Martinez has been ruled out. He was dealing with an issue and then played about 30 minutes against Miami off the bench, but he's been ruled out for this one after that. And of course, NYC on shorter rest. And then Red Bulls, meanwhile, turning around a bit of form, beating Montreal on the road, taking care of business, and trying to stay alive because the Fire, of course, are up 2 points with a game in hand and looking, just in the much better form right now with a bit more of a favorable schedule. So this is one that the Red Bulls truly need. The NYC, of course, has been very complicated, but I think the Red Bulls' home form will prevail here. And there usually haven't been many draws in this matchup. Usually one team has been truly putting their stamp on the game early and running away with it. So I'm going to go with the Red Bulls to do that here. I think missing Alonso Martinez on shorter rest as well is really going to hurt this NYC's attack, and the Red Bulls will be able to get by. Moving on, we have a pretty tasty Eastern matchup in the lower portion of the playoff line, with the Fire holding that final playing spot and the Crew with possibilities of ending just about anywhere with how it looks. And, of course, with how the recent form has been, just one win in the past 6 MLS games and currently 2 winless after, of course, going up against Toronto and not being able to hold on, allowing another equalizer. And, of course, the terrible news is that Abu Ali is going to be out for about 6 weeks or so. That's the estimation, and that's, of course, the rest of this regular season and potentially even into the playoffs, most likely like the first round or so. And then coming back from that is also not easy and simple. So Rossi's still out. He was kind of maybe working his way back based on what Nancy was saying, but I think it's going to be more towards trending for next week. And then, of course, Camacho potentially returning to that back line. But this team has just been lacking that bite all season. The past couple of weeks, they showed some signs, of course, against Atlanta, against NYC. But that defense just has also been super shaky, and it's hard for them to rely on clean sheets. So the Fire are in a really good position here to get their first win in this matchup in over 9 meetings. The Crew have won 7 out of the last 8, the other one being a tie. And they also won the previous meeting this season. It was a 4-2 game on opening night in which the Fire took a couple of leads and then they kind of shot themselves in the foot, and then the Crew kind of ran away with it. They were still kind of in that rhythm going into the season before things kind of teetered off, and they became, of course, the more inconsistent side we know and see today. But it's interesting as well because the home form for the Fire and the away form for the Crew are just deadlocked, essentially. 5-5 at home for the Fire, and then 5-6-4 on the road for the Crew. So I think this is a great opportunity for the Fire, but most of those home wins have come not at Soldier Field as well. So they're the team in form. They just completely ran through yes, kind of Minnesota's B team in a sense, because they didn't have a true starting striker that they would have liked, with the Oboa dealing with issues. But this team's healthy. That attack is electric, and being at home here is a fantastic opportunity. It's only one of, I believe, 2 home games left of the 4. And of course, this is one, like right now they have that game in hand on the Red Bulls, and this could be a really decisive weekend either way, as far as determining if this is really going to be a battle down to decision day between the Fire and the Red Bulls, or if the Fire are going to kind of widen that gap. So we'll see. But as of now, I think the Fire definitely have a very good shot at least drawing in this game. I do see goals. The Crew, I think Russell Rowe is going to get that starting nod now, and I don't mind that. And they have some other issues. So I see goals in this one. I'm going to call this one either a 2-1 Fire win or a 2-2 draw. Next up, it's a cross-conference battle. Nashville hosts Houston, and Nashville kind of not in the best spirits right now. Things are really, even though they're in 4th, things are really looking shaky with so many teams in and around them. And that was emphasized by the fact that they played a really tight game against Orlando, coming off the U.S. Open Cup win, right? Getting into the final on a short rest, but then conceding a literal last-minute goal to lose at Orlando after conceding at Cincinnati. Again, they play these other teams around them very, very tight, but just have not locked it down late and hung on for, sharing the points, which is crucial. Those 2 extra points could have been absolutely massive right now, right? With only less than a handful of games remaining. Meanwhile, Houston, they beat the Timbers at home once again. But regardless, Houston is fully in contention for this playing spot, with the Earthquakes, of course, just completely, I don't want to say choking it, but just having some bad matchups right late, some bad, some good teams they've been facing as of late, so they haven't been able to pick up the points. And it's kind of up for grabs between 3 or 4 teams right now, this final 9th spot. So Houston, despite everything we've said about them, still has some life, and we'll see what happens. But I think Nashville, on a full week of rest, given this situation, I just don't think Houston can match up with them and their kind of blistering pace and playing possession. So I'm going to take Nashville to win this one comfortably. Moving on, it's St. Louis hosting LAFC. St. Louis technically still not out of it, but they need all 9 points, because that is the gap between them and Dallas in 9th. And Dallas also has 4 games remaining. So also with so many teams on 36 points, once again, it's all but over. I doubt they even win out their last 3 games, and that doubt starts here because they're playing a red-hot LAFC team that has had, what is it now, 3 hat tricks in the last 3 games between Boanga. Each of the last 2, Son the game before, and they've scored in all those games. On top of that, the opposite player, and that connection is just absolutely on fire, despite the fact that Ordaz and Bobasi have been dealing with injuries for 3 to 4 games or whatnot, and they're kind of just playing Son as a 9. Martinez kind of mixed in there, but it doesn't matter. Tillman's going to be suspended for this one. We'll see if Ordaz can maybe make the bench here, but with the form LAFC is in, they're really putting a chokehold on this 4th spot. Seattle has really slipped up out of Leagues Cup. Austin added to that, and they've basically made that gap non-existent between them and Seattle for 5th, 6th. But with LAFC, with the goal difference they're accumulating in these wins, with the points, of course, making up these games, and the fact that they still have 2 games on most of these teams, I think they're a shoo-in for a home playoff game in the first round at least, and could even catch up to a Minnesota that is really struggling right now and doesn't look its best because of the injuries. So we'll see how this all shakes out, but once again, hard to back St. Louis to really be too competitive in this one. I'm going to take LAFC by multiple goals. Moving on, it's the Rapids hosting Minnesota, and honestly, I just don't see this one being all that entertaining. The Rapids have been really, really inconsistent. Meanwhile, Minnesota, of course, as we just talked about, have been missing Yeboah, and it's looking serious. It looks like it's probably going to be till the end of, or it is going to be through the end of the regular season. And that really hurts this attack. You don't have a focal point with this counter-attacking style. They're going to be very defensive, but they're going to be feeling the pressure more because they don't have those outlets to really play through and keep teams honest as far as those long balls, those hold up play and everything those types of players provide. So with the altitude advantage here for Colorado, I would slightly favor them, but I just don't see many goals in this one. And this is an important game for both teams because their current standing situations are very tight. But yeah, it's just not what I'm really keeping my eye on as far as an entertainment value. But Colorado's the healthier team. They're probably more hungry because it's about just even making the playoffs for them compared to what Minnesota's situation is. But yeah, I would take Colorado to maybe squeak out a win here, but in a lower scoring match. Next up, it's RSL hosting Austin. RSL has had a really tough luck recently after being one of the more consistent teams in the second half of the season because they had to play LAFC back-to-back and they just got completely outmatched. And I can't really fault them too much because I don't know how many teams would have been able to stop LAFC with the way they're playing right now. Maybe just limit them a little bit more, but I just don't think the result would have changed. But yeah, their goal difference because of those two matches has been, 2 4-1 losses has been a bit shot there. But still fully in it. They're, 3 points off now, the 9th spot, but they have that game in hand. So very possible here against an Austin side that actually has been in a bit of a revival, right? They made the Open Cup final, and this style of play is just very suited for the playoffs. So it's right around that time where they're kind of ramping up this. It's just perfectly meshing, right? Because they're a very complicated team to play against. They make you think you're controlling the game, but they just find these moments, and they're not all that consistent in these counterattacks. They make some really boneheaded decisions as far as when how they pass, not passing, players being too selfish, and not using that numerical advantage. But regardless, they just find themselves in so many situations that it's almost impossible to mess it all up fully as far as getting the results they need. So it's just a stingy team. The goals are coming from really unexpected sources, but the chemistry seems to be there. That fight and spirit is there, but I just don't know how long this can last through the end of this regular season. They've made up great ground. They're on the toes of, or on the backs of Seattle in 5th. But I think this will be a pretty cagey match as well. I just think RSL will have just a little bit too much quality with Luna. I think he's going to be the difference in this one. I just think Austin will be a little bit more exhausted from the recent run of games. And, most of their successes come at home, anyways, as far as the draws and everything. So I'm going to say RSL wins this one in another kind of modestly scoring match. Next up in the West, it's 2 teams who have been eliminated now officially. And it's the Galaxy hosting Kansas City. Galaxy, of course, have been running out a lot of youth players recently and a bunch of players who are questionable that, just aren't going to be risked. So there's not much we're talking about there. They've qualified for the next year's Champions Cup. They're going to reload. Kansas City on the other end, still a pretty average roster, even with, Garcia's been injured for quite some time as one of those DPs they signed this year. And so that's been disappointing because we haven't really seen his true good sample size, right? And now Shalloy seems to be dealing with an ankle injury, which was a bit of a surprise last game. And we'll see how long that keeps him out if they just kind of shut him down for the rest of the season, since now it's officially over. But yeah, one of those games that unfortunately could have mattered down towards the end of the season, right? That's kind of how the schedule makers might have been envisioning it. Just unfortunately didn't pan out that way. And so there's no reason to really watch this game if you're not a fan, once again. Portland hosts Dallas in this one, and it's 7th versus 9th in the West. Dallas has quietly been extremely consistent recently, unbeaten in their last 6, 3 wins and 3 draws in that time, including some really standout results. I would say a draw against LAFC, 2 good results, one being a win and another being a tie against their rivals Austin, and then beating the Timbers to start this unbeaten run at home at the beginning of August. So these two teams meet again after that, and the Timbers have been in some real kind of lower scoring games recently, kind of coming out of Leagues Cup, and only just 1 win in the 7 MLS games since Leagues Cup. So that's pretty concerning, but it still seems like they'll be able to hold on for some sort of play-in spot or playoff spot, whether that's above that line in 7th as they are now, or maybe Colorado or whoever catches up. But Dallas has been doing this all without their top goalkeeper, Pice, and that's also been just another insanely impressive feat to add on top of this run. So they were one of the hottest teams on the road, especially in the first half of the season, I would say. Recently, that form has been kind of iffy, like a bunch of draws, which is respectable, but not outright dominant performances. And I think that's kind of going to be more of the same in this one as far as what to expect. Like, I don't know what exactly the Timbers' problem is, but these new additions just haven't seemed to kind of boost this attack and make it a little bit more lethal so far. But at home, they've been largely dominant. One of the better teams in the West for sure. 7 wins, 5 draws, 3 losses. Only 5 points off the Whitecaps, who lead the West in home points. So it's not been all that bad at home. And Dallas having to travel here, I don't really. It's one that just screams draw to me. I think Dallas can be stingy, and they're, of course, with that game in hand, going to be feeling a little bit more comfortable about where they stand. So I think they can afford to not take too many risks and make it a little bit uncomfortable for Portland, who's dealing with their own sort of rut. So I'm going to call this one a 1-1 draw. Next up, it's San Diego hosting San Jose as part of the couple of late night games on Saturday's slate. And it's a big difference between these two teams. First in the West between 11th, two teams in real just different situations, right? Because San Diego has, everything going for it, right? Trying to hold on to that first spot, still potentially in the Shield race, despite other teams having games in hand, because there's so much that can happen. But San Jose on the other end, 4 losses in its last 5. They beat the Dynamo in that other game out of the 5, and these two teams met in mid-August about a month ago, where San Diego came back. This is a game that was 2-1 for San Diego, and all the goals were in the final 10 plus minutes, with San Diego coming back to win all in that span, with Dreyer having the finishing goal. And he's been unbelievable on the road. He's had so many trademark performances, but here they're at home, where, of course, once again, San Diego's just been racking up the points in general, right? And San Jose, it just feels like, doesn't have enough on the attacking end as far as that depth. I think we've seen a little bit of the age of Chicho, and of course, Jose Martinez. And we haven't really seen them play together all that much. We've seen some Preston Judd. We've seen some. I just don't think this attacking midfield outside of Espinoza is all that good enough, and where I expected this team to be preseason was just about making that 9th or 8th spot. And while they're still in it, this is another real hard ask, especially based on their form recently, and they just lost to St. Louis as well as at home, which could have been the final nail in the coffin, honestly. But yeah, this is one that it's hard to expect them to get the points in. I think San Diego is gonna really put the sword to them, put the pressure on them. Their style of play, I think, will just outclass this Quakes team. They're in bad standing right now, and they need a miracle, because it's just looking really, really grim. If they're still 3 or 4 points behind with 2 games remaining, that's a lot to ask to happen outside of doing your own job, which it just hasn't been happening recently. So I think San Diego will be just fine. Really no injuries or anything to speak of. Bombino's going to that under-20 World Cup. But besides that, they've kind of recovered as far as the injuries on that back line, and they have all the depth in the world in midfield, and scoring doesn't seem to be all that bad for them, despite the striker Ingvartsen just barely playing this season. So I'm going to take San Diego to win this one comfortably and keep up their push for being first in the West in their inaugural season. The final match on Saturday night is a real interesting one between the Sounders and the Whitecaps. The Sounders are winless coming out of the League Cup in their, I believe, 3 games. Since then, after, of course, winning the title, they lost to Miami in the rematch. They dropped points to the Galaxy at home and then snatched a loss from the jaws of victory. If I said that right, even going to Austin, having so many point blank chances, Jordan Morris especially, and Brad Stuver just won that game outright for them, kept them in it before a literal last gasp goal gave Austin the full 3 points. So it's just a team that, despite, some players coming back and everything they've kind of built this season, from just kind of a bunch of players contributing, having that same type of spread out offense, right? There's not really a main guy for Sounders. Despite all that, seems like they're not going to end with a home playoff game to start this postseason. Meanwhile, the Whitecaps, they had a midweek game. They drew 1-1 against the Timbers, coming back at home in that one to draw. And then, Mueller dealing with a bit of an injury, potentially could feature off the bench here, but also Brian White dealing with his own injury. So that back line as well has just been decimated throughout the season. They've kind of been still holding ground, but it's weaker. So I would say, the Sounders at home are very hard to beat, but with the form they're in, the Whitecaps have an opportunity, but at the same time, they're also not at full strength. So it's an intriguing matchup, and I feel like usually from what I've noticed, when the Sounders have been in these types of situations, just based on both teams' form and everything, and maybe some rotation, like, it's just the most random high-scoring game. And so that's where my brain's taking me for no reason besides that. And yeah, I'm just gonna say, for whatever reason, we're gonna see a bunch of goals in this game, but it's hard to pick a winner. To wrap it all up, Sunday Night Soccer features Cincinnati and Orlando, 2nd versus 6th in the East. And Cincinnati, despite a couple of falters, losing back-to-back games 1-0 against NYC and Philly, in a stretch in which they didn't score a goal at home in 3 straight, they turned that around with Evander just being Evander. He got them through against Nashville with that last-second goal, and then they went to the Galaxy and handled business. They made it look a little difficult at the end, but mostly were comfortable from minute 1, dominating the really bad Galaxy, of course, this season. Evander with a hat-trick of assists, Brenner getting a goal, and the other right back, I forget his name, getting on the score sheet as well. So they're in better form. Evander's just been playing up to that MVP level. Meanwhile, Orlando, a last-second goal against Nashville in a 3-2 win to turn some form around after, of course, they dropped points at DC, and there was 3 losses before then between Leagues Cup and MLS play. So still keep treading water, staying in these kind of middle pack playoff spots. And for Cincy, it seems like Celentano could potentially make his way back, start here after 2 or 3 games out. And that's a big return potentially, because he's a top goalkeeper. And then also Miazga, he's going to be injured for this one. And then Orlando, that midfield's looking a little rough right now because Araujo was out last game. It seems like his status is questionable for this one. And also not sure if I'm saying this right. I forget how it's pronounced. Gerbe was dealing with concussion protocol. He's been a bright standout, the younger player in that midfield whenever like Atuesta or Araujo's been out. But if they're both going to be out here, that's a key thing. I think Cincinnati's midfield will probably overpower Orlando's in this one, and just have enough to get by. I think Cincinnati wins this one 2-1.